got to give it to you. You're durable. You.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Sports Special. It's our Saturday show, which is our update and debate show where me and the great Jack Hirsch go at it, debating the biggest topics and biggest happenings in baseball history. This is where we cover all the Northeastern local sports, New York, Boston, and Philly. You can follow us live at Mac's Sports Facebook page. Just go to @MacMan62 Facebook search, and it'll bring you right to us. You can Google the Mac and Jack Sports Show, find us live on YouTube and Twitch, and also see our past shows. Follow us on Instagram @Mac and Jack Sports to see all the local Northeast professional teams. Like, follow, share where you can to help us keep growing. I'm Mac with my co-host, legendary boxing sports writer and former president of the Boxing Writers Association, Jack Hirsch, who is also our sports historian gatekeeper. How you doing today, my New York friend?
Good. You know what a gatekeeper is in the sport of boxing, Mac?
What's that?
Gatekeeper is someone the elite guys have to get by. If you beat him, you're elite. If you can't beat him, you're not. You know, he's in the middle, but he himself is kind of stuck in that one position. He's the guideline.
Okay, all right. So that's what a boxing gatekeeper is. Right. And with us today, Jack, we have our special guest that has joined us in a lot of Saturdays, and hopefully he'll be in every Saturday with us. It's Dr. Paul Semendinger, award-winning author, founder of the popular New York Yankees blog, Start Spreading the News. And also, he's an award-winning author with his latest book, where he got an award for Scattering the Ashes. And I'm going to bring him up right now, Jack. Not only is he a Yankee expert and historian, but he knows a lot about baseball, period. So on our debate special today, our Saturday show, where football is going crazy, we're going to bring you right back to baseball, at least for a little while here with the doc. How you doing today, Doctor?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Doing really good. Jack looks really good. He's got his shirt on.
Debate show. I'm ready. Yeah.
And I
very calm too. Very ready to go. Yes,
he is.
Not intimidated.
And I'm totally unprepared for this one, Doc. So he should win pretty easily today. Doc, I want to start off with, of course, your popular blog, Start Spreading the News, and kind of a double plug for both of us. If you go to Mac and Jack sports.com and check out the website that I just recently put up of Mac's Sports Insiders, we have the doctor, we have a lot of information about him, and we have the link to Start Spreading the News blog. So go check that out. Link on over if you need to, and check out his blog. His site is awesome. He has a lot of great information, updates, history, and a lot of different things about the Yankees that you can go ahead and check out. Great articles. So Doc and Jack, I think we have talked about in the past on the past shows about the Yankees and what they need this year to improve, to maybe get a chance at going into the World Series. We talked about re-signing LeMahieu. We talked about maybe getting another starting pitcher in the rotation. They do need maybe another infielder or outfielder. Probably we should keep Brett Gardner if he wants to stay. I mean, we would all agree on that, correct?
I think we're homers. I mean, we're all Yankee fans here. The Mets are in the news as far as baseball.
We're going to talk about the Mets in a minute, Jack. Right now, I want. Right.
You know what this reminds me of?
Yes.
Years ago with Frank Gifford. He was a homer for the New York Giants, the football team. The Jets had won the Super Bowl the year before, but whenever he'd start off the news on CBS, He'd go over the Jets quick and he'd go, but in the Giant game, and he'd go on and on and on with the news.
Well, Jack,
the Mets and Yankees.
Jack, when the Mets win the World Series, I will start off with the Mets, and that won't be for another 50 years or so. So anyway, I think we can all agree that that's the top priorities of the Yankees, I would think, going into this year, unless you guys have any other thoughts on that.
I think the top priority, Doc, Mac, is the catcher position. I mean, outside of dealing with the free agent signing with DJ LeMahieu, I mean, first and foremost, okay? I think the catcher position has to get resolved. And of course, I at least would like them to take a very hard look at Trevor Bauer. They have to determine whether he's too much of a head case to sign to a multi-year deal.
What do you think, Doc? What do you think? Do you agree with all that?
Actually, I think I disagree with some of it. I would bring Brett Gardner back only on a very cheap contract. Obviously, they didn't renew him. Right. I would love to bring DJ LeMahieu back, but I have a feeling he's going to command 4 or 5 years, and I don't think he's going to be an elite player for 4 or 5 years. I think he'll be very good in 2021, and I think he'll be above average in 2022. But I don't think I'd want to bring him back. I'd bring him back for 3 years. I wouldn't bring him back for 4 or 5 years. And so that's my concern there. I also think the Yankees are far too right-handed. I did an article on this that ran last week where the Yankees don't have zero left-handed punch. And I compared all the Yankee World Championship teams over the years of their illustrious history, seeing if there was ever a team that had such few left-handed hitters.
Great
and
point.
The answer is none. They haven't. So one of my thoughts with LeMahieu is if he is too expensive, you let him go. Unfortunately, you might have gotten his best 2 years of his career already anyway. And I would invest the money and the prospects or whatever in order to try to get Francisco Lindor. He's obviously an elite player. He's much younger. He plays shortstop. He's a left-handed hitter. He's also a great clubhouse guy. And if you get Lindor, you get to move Gleyber Torres off of shortstop, where I don't think he belongs. I think he proved that. And back to where he can be a better ball player at second base. That's the other problem with LeMahieu. If you have him, he's a second baseman. You can move him around, but if you're paying somebody elite money, I think you really want to give them a position. So those are my thoughts on those.
Those are great points.
Let me just say, there's no way LeMahieu's they could sign him for 3 years. He's going to command at least 4 years.
That's my worry.
5 years, conceivably 6 years. I wouldn't go for 6 years, but they might have to go for 5 years. Okay, because someone like the owner of the Angels, Artie Moreno, he's going to make a hard push, for LeMahieu, or someone else is going to come in and offer him big money. So the Yankees are really going to have to determine to step up. I don't agree with you that he's only going to have a couple of good years left. And keep in mind, LeMahieu's elite defensively. He's not going to lose that at all. And sometimes you have to give a guy more years than you want to. I cringed when the Yankees gave Garrett Cole 9 years. 9 years? I mean,
yeah, guys.
Not them otherwise.
Yeah, guys, and I mean that's why we lost Cano, right? He wanted more years on his contract. We matched as far as the money went. He just wanted the years that we weren't going to give him, and that's why he moved on to Seattle. Didi's out there. He's coming up on a contract on free agency. You see any interest there on Didi, Doc?
If they re-sign LeMahieu, then you have Gleyber playing shortstop. So I don't know where you put where you put Didi. If they don't re-sign LeMahieu and you move Gleyber to second base and you can't get Lindor, I think Didi would be a nice for a year or two. Same type of thing with LeMahieu. I just don't. When you talked about Cano just a moment ago, the Yankees didn't want to pay Cano the exact same age years that they're now saying that people are now saying, and everyone's arguing that we want to pay LeMahieu. I would argue that a shortstop second base combination of Lindor and Gleyber Torres over the next 5 years will outperform a shortstop second base combination of LeMahieu and Torres over the next 5 years. I'd rather be thinking long term, and it's not even a step back with Lindor, to say that you're looking all to the future. He's a premier player now. So
But
that's
Doc,
my argument. I love
isn't-
LeMahieu. I just don't want to give him 4 years.
Isn't the plan to move LeMahieu to first base, move Gleyber Torres to second base? Because Gleyber Torres really didn't have a good year defensively at shortstop. And maybe get Didi Gregorius back. He could play short, Gleyber at second like before, LeMahieu at first. And I hate moving Luke Voigt, trading him, whatever, because who knows what the Yankees would have been without him last year.
So the only argument there is with Luke Voigt having him play. The argument of letting him go makes sense in a lot of ways. You sell high, right? He's coming off his best year. His value may never be higher. I think the only argument against LeMahieu as a first baseman is I don't think he hits for the power like teams usually want at first base. If you're okay with a guy who's going to hit in 300 with 15 to 20 home runs, then that's a different argument.
Yeah,
very, very good points. So, like Jack brought up earlier, there are a couple things that have been going on with our rivals. The Mets not so much, maybe rivalry for publicity in New York, but also with our real rivals, the Boston Red Sox. Cohen comes in, he wipes out the front of a house like I knew he would. I mean, it's going to be his team. Mets had to have a good, solid core. I mean, they have a good hitting team. Their pitchers, they need a little help in pitching, of course. They didn't drive in the runs when they could have. They were terrible at that. But as far as just a hitting team, they were up amongst the best. So what do you expect? How fast do you expect, Doc, that the Mets turn this around? Is it this coming year? Is it next year? I mean, they still got to rebuild their whole front office and get the team to where they feel that it's competitive. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's always hard to predict, and I don't follow the Mets as closely as I do with the Yankees. I think Steve Cohen's going to go in there and he's going to do everything he can to get the big talent and to change the narrative. Obviously, he just house cleaned with the whole front office. You may see him become a big player for DJ LeMahieu. I mean, what better of a big time move would there be than for him to steal LeMahieu right from underneath the Yankees desires, right underneath their eyes. Now all of a sudden he's playing for the Mets. I think it's a game changer with the Mets having a front office and an owner that are going to be playing in the big free agent market again. I have an article that's coming up today where I talk about the fact that in the 80s, the Mets really owned New York. They were New York sports. In fact, I think the Mets were the first New York baseball team ever to draw 3 million fans. And the Yankees obviously got great and became the darlings of New York again. But a great New York Mets team could actually be a boon to the Yankees because they would have to work really hard to keep up with the deep pockets of Steve Cohen.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that.
What no one talks about is the Sandy Alderson factor. Okay, he's coming back to run baseball operations for the Mets because obviously him and Steve Cohen had a very good relationship during the time Sandy was there in the past and Steve Cohen was a minority owner. Steve Cohen's not just coming in cold. He's been around the team as a minority owner. He just didn't have any decision-making influence. And I don't think Sandy Alderson would come back unless he was allowed to do things his way. And that Steve Cohen probably has enough respect for Sandy Alderson to defer to his decisions. So I'm not that sure Sandy Alderson, his first year coming back, is just going to make these big free agent splashes. I mean, maybe one, but I think he's going to be prudent within baseball parameters.
Yeah, he's a great baseball mind. I just read a great article, I think it was in the New York Post yesterday, where Sandy Alderson also is not afraid to spend big. And it was under his watch with the A's that I think he made Jose Canseco and Ricky Henderson two of the biggest salaried players in the games in the late 80s, early 90s. So, he's not like the Mets are playing small ball now. The Mets they've got a great guy in Sandy Alderson. They've got an owner with deep pockets. And they want to make their mark. They're tired of being the Mets, right?
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of Mets fans are really happy about that. So we go to Boston. They hire back their manager, Alex Cora, in the big scandal there with Houston. It doesn't surprise me. I had a feeling that that's what they were going to do once he came off suspension. The Red Sox, it seems, are still in rebuilding, though. I don't know if they're going to be major players this year. They fell off, and they knew they were going to fall off last year. What do you see for them in the next couple of years, Doc? Do you see them becoming competitive again in the next 2 years, or you think this is going to be a long rebuilding process for them?
It may be a longer rebuilding process. It saddened me when they traded Mookie Betts because, I mean, when you have a premier talent like that, and he's a homegrown guy and he's young, you got to keep him. But the Red Sox made the decision that he was going to be too expensive, which, when you're the Red Sox or the Dodgers or the Yankees, any of these big market teams, now the Mets, you hate to see guys like that not be able to stick with the club. Mookie Betts is a fun ball player. He was fun to root against. And it would have been great if he had stayed with the Red Sox. So I think when they've made the move to get rid of him, I'm not sure they're going to bring Jackie Bradley Jr. back. They're probably looking at a couple of year rebuild, but they now have a manager who's obviously taken them to a World Series already.
Doc, I think you're being a little too tough on the Red Sox organization, because Mookie Betts all along when he was with Boston was saying he's going to test the free agent market. He made no bones about it. He really wasn't that interested in negotiating. He wanted to see what he could get on the open market. And I think the reason he signed with the Dodgers when he did, and for less money than he would have taken before, I think he saw with attendance non-existent at the ballparks, the pandemic, the teams maybe not having as much money to spend, he decided to grab that deal with the Dodgers. And I guess he was obviously very happy, at LA.
No, he's happy.
Well.
He just won a World Series, right? So
right. And no matter what happens with that from the Dodgers and from now on, they could always say they won a World Series with Mookie Betts, so they don't wind up losing on this deal no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think he saw the writing on the wall with the Red Sox that they weren't going to be as good as they had been, and that he just wanted to go somewhere. And of course, who doesn't want to win a championship? So we're going to turn into Phillies real quick, Doc. We do cover Phillies sports there. We do have connection there with our old manager who had the Phillies playing really good ball this year, surprised a few people. I didn't like the way they got rid of him. I think it was a little bit of a power struggle between him and Cashman, and of course they hired Boone. What are your thoughts on what he's doing over there with the Phillies? And do you think he'll bring the Phillies up there to compete for the division?
I think Joe Girardi's an outstanding manager, and I loved him being the Yankee manager, and I wish he had stayed. I don't know if we have time to get into the whole Aaron Boone stuff and all that, but. And Jack was saying before about Gary Sanchez, which manager got the best out of Gary Sanchez? Mm-hmm. It was Joe Girardi. Right. And the sense was maybe he was too hard on him, right? I think that was one of the narratives. Mm-hmm. And then the Yankees got rid of Girardi and they brought in Boone, and Sanchez has not performed very well under Boone. Now, I don't know if that's a direct correlation or it's just causation or whatever, it just a coincidence, but yeah, I think Joe Girardi's a great manager. I think he should have stayed with the Yankees. I wish the Yankees had kept him. And I wish him only the best in Philadelphia. And I think he's going to do a great job down there because he's been a winner wherever he's gone.
Well, this was a short season, so it's kind of hard to judge. And Girardi had no bullpen. But moving forward, it looks like he's going to lose his catcher and his shortstop, Romuto and Gregorius. And so they're going to take a blow there, but the Phillies are willing to spend money. So they're going to counter. They're going to sign someone.
Yeah, I think that's true too. And you want to say a little bit about Boone, and I'm always ready to talk about Aaron Boone and what he's been doing the past few years. So what are your thoughts on that, Doc?
I believe that Boone deserves another year. I think he's actually won. Yankees have won a lot of games with him, and I think he's done better than anybody would have thought. I thought it was a strange move at the time to lose Girardi and hire a guy who's never managed or coached. I think that was the Yankees taking floating on a wing in a prayer, saying, "Let's just see what happens." We think he's a great baseball guy. One of the things, we're all a step removed. I'm not in the clubhouse. I don't get to see all the relationships. And I understand Boone is great in there. I would like to see him become a little better at making decisions. I'd like to see him have more control over the decisions. When he makes a mistake, you always hear that it's a organizational decision, and we planned all this ahead of time. I'd like a manager to be able to now. He's going into his his third year, his fourth year. I'd like him to be able to make his own decisions, and let's find out if he's a good manager or not at this time. But the Yankees have played well under him. They just haven't been able to get to the next level.
We're living, unfortunately, in an era where the manager is not allowed to manage as much as he did in the past. He can do it during the game, but as far as lineups go, the GM wants to be the guy in charge, and that's not a healthy thing. You have to have an owner who departmentalizes things, let the GM know you do your job this way, the manager does his job that way. And if the manager and GM are smart, they'll get along well, cooperate with one another, because sometimes the manager is going to want a player from another team. So it's wise to have a good relationship with the GM, or the GM might suggest maybe you put this guy in the lineup. And it wasn't working out at the end with Girardi and Cashman, just like it wasn't working out at the end with Cashman and Torrey as well. I mean, both managers had a nice long run with Cashman, so I don't mean to make Cashman out to be the villain, because he's done a great job with the Yankees if you look at everything on balance.
Yeah, I believe that maybe one of us three could manage the Yankees and do a good job and maybe win a lot of games. That's a talented team. That's a team that hits home runs, and they give you some of the best players to play with. You would only have to worry about cohesiveness, in the locker room. So, I mean, I'm not going to give Boone a lot of credit. I think he did a good job. I don't think he's one of the best managers in the league by far, and I haven't seen anything that make me change my mind yet as far as on the field and decision making. If you're any kind of manager and you have a GM calling the lineups for you, I don't really consider you, a manager. I consider you maybe more of a puppet. And
well,
maybe
if you want to be employed, you have to do so and so.
Yeah, no, I understand that too, Jack. So that's why maybe Girardi left and Torrey ran into problems, and I hated losing Girardi. But that's just my opinion. So we got what I got for you and the doc. You're both very good at history in the Yankees. I'm okay. I'm not as good as you two. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do something here that we do regularly on the show for Jack. And Jack so far is like 0 for the last 6. So here's his chance to shine.
A close 0 for 6.
Yes.
And the wrong answer.
You are what your record says you are, Jack. So here we go with our Yankees trivia question for all you people out there. You can guess also. So let's see if I can bring you a little music in here, make it sound a little good.
Who's going to answer, Doc or me and myself?
We'll let you go first, Jack. And then Doc can either agree with you or disagree with you. Doc, get ready to disagree. Okay, that's the only thing I can tell you. So in Yankees trivia, in 1913, the first Yankees manager was known as the Peerless Leader. What is his name, Jack?
That was not Miller Huggins. He was. No, you
Jack,
better defer to Doc on it.
That's not how you answer questions. You don't say who it wasn't. We look at you looking it up. Look it up. Don't look it up, Jack. Don't cheat on me. All right, Doc.
Don't look anything up, but all my wrong answers. Come on.
I see you peeking over your board there. Go ahead, Doc. You're sitting there confident. So
I'm going to guess Frank Chance.
Oh, you took a chance and you got it right. So there it is.
Yes.
Is that Tinkers to Evans the Chance?
That is. He was a Yankee for one season, but he was the manager.
Cool.
Yeah, he was
the best double play combo historically in baseball history.
Baseball's sad lexicon: Tinker to Evers to Chance.
Cool.
Yeah,
I didn't know that. And he was a Yankee manager. He was
for a very short time. We could look it up. He wasn't the Yankee manager for long, and then the Yankees. I'm not sure who they got after him. It might have been like Roger Peckinpah. I think it was, who was then the youngest manager. But I would have to check all that.
When I was a kid, I'd be hearing Tinkers to Evers to Chance. That would be the great stuff. It was like drilled into me when I was in Little League.
And of course, we know originally they weren't even called the Yankees, and they weren't even from New York. So we're going way, way back. I got a couple of friends that are authors for Yankees. that I talk to a lot. So they said, hey, throw this in there. They may not get it, as Doc said, it was for a very short
Good one,
time.
Doc.
Yes, sir. So Doc can only stay with us to 8:30, Jack. So we'll begin the debate after that. So tell us a little bit about your blog, Doc, and we're going to get into your book a little bit because I think it's a great read, and I want people to know that are tuning in the first time to the show. What is Start Spreading the News blog all about?
All right, so it's a Yankees blog, and we put up articles, at least 4 articles a day. During the week, we have a little baseball card trivia at noon. We put up a daily tweet. We put regular articles up at 6, 10, 1, and 4. We have a staff of about 12 or 13 writers. And we talk about the Yankees. We talk about baseball. We put up some other features, like on every Tuesday at 10 a.m. we have a little discussion. I throw a question out there for all the writers, and everybody just sends their opinions on. Every Thursday at 10, we have a nice feature called the Start Spreading the News interview series. And we've been interviewing all sorts of people in the world of sports and writing and reporting. And so we run those interviews every Thursday at 10. Every Friday, we do a mailbag, where one of our writers, Andy Singer, who's our lead writer, and he answers all the questions that people send in. It's a fun Yankees blog. We keep it current. As I say, there's lots of articles every day. It's very popular. People seem to really love it, and I think we've got great writers and great content. So come in, check it out.
Yeah, I've checked it out. It's awesome, Doc. And tell the people a little bit about your award-winning book that was published called Scattering the Ashes, and let them know what that's about.
Thank you. Scattering the Ashes is a novel. It's not true. A lot of people say it reads like a memoir, which makes me happy. It did win it's won a couple of awards for fiction. Actually, it's right here behind me. You can see it. Here it is.
Yes, sir. I got my copy right here too, Doc. I got it here.
This is the paperback. It's just out in paperback, but it's also out in hardcover. Yeah. And it's a story of a young man. He's a school teacher, and his father passes away. He thinks he's going to have a great summer, and he doesn't have a great summer because his dad dies. And the big twist in the story is when the will is being read, his father leaves him this request that he scatter his ashes at places that had been meaningful to him and his son over the course of their lives together. And this was a journey that the main character named Sam Holmes never wanted nor asked for. And the story is really about him finding himself over the time that he has to go to these various places to scatter his father's ashes. He meets a woman who he falls in love with. His life changes. He also trains for and runs the New York City Marathon. He's a big baseball fan. So it's a book that's on a lot of levels. It's also quite spiritual because obviously he's dealing with the death of his father and the emotions he has as he deals with all that. But it's gotten great reviews. People seem to really love it. I'm so thrilled and happy, and I would love to talk about it even more. But obviously we're running out of time. So thank you.
Yes, it's a privilege to have 2 great writers on the show at the same time. One mainly in boxing, and the other one, of course, in baseball, and just published a book. And I encourage everybody to go out there. You should be right on Amazon, right, Doc?
Oh yeah, it's on there. Yep, Barnes and Noble, it's everywhere. So
check Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Pick up the book. I've read it all the way through. It's a great read, and really enjoyed it. So. Anything before the Doc leaves, Jack, you got for him?
I just want to know, Doc, I hate to think along these lines. Are the Yankees going to have any downtime the way the New England Patriots are now? Is there any realistic chance within the next decade we might hit the dark days we had in the mid-'60s and early '70s?
I hope not. If Steve Cohen is going to be spending big for the Mets, I think the Yankees have to respond and spend big for the Yankees. Yeah. And my hope there is that that would prevent the Yankees from going into any dark periods. You know, you could argue we've been in a dark period. We haven't won a World Series since 2009. And as Yankees fans, that's an eternity, right? We're spoiled. Yeah. But
just one quick thing, because I know you have to go. You said the 1980s, New York was a Met town. Believe it or not, in the 1960s, when the Mets came into existence as such a fun team, even though they were awful, it was a Met town. The Yankees were a great team in the early 60s, yet the Mets drew a lot more people to the games.
And they brought in Casey Stengel, and they were the lovable Mets.
Yeah.
And that's what made 69 so amazing, right?
Yeah.
Because nobody ever thought the Mets could win that quickly. And they came out of nowhere. And there's a loyal Met following in New York. They've always said New York's a National League city.
Yeah, it's very true. Very true. Well, Doc, again, thank you for coming in. Hopefully we can get you back in here next Saturday. And we always enjoy having you on.
I love being here. I love you guys both. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.
Dr. Paul Semendinger from the Start Spreading the News and award-winning author. Thank you again, Doc.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
So there you go. The great Dr. Paul
Semendinger.
He's a great guest.
We're getting, the guests we get on this show, Mac.
Yeah. I mean, from Major League networks, we've got set up where we actually talked to Bob Arum. I mean, we've had some really huge guests on this show, and it's a lot of fun visiting.
Oates, 5-time All-Pro center.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some really
Super Bowl champion.
Yeah, we've had some really good guests on the show, which is good for our show right now, Jack. I mean, we're not out there getting big ratings and doing things yet, but we'll get there. We'll get there, Jack. We'll definitely get there. So, Jack, we get to our one of my favorite shows during the week. I know it's one of yours too, and that's our debate show. So, what we'll do is we'll do the first debate of the greatest left fielder in the history of baseball. Then we'll probably cut out for a commercial and then come back with that just to let you know what we're doing so you're ready. So you go ahead and go first, Jack. Who do you got as the greatest left fielder in baseball history?
Well, this isn't really that hard of one to pick. I mean, it's got to be Barry Bonds.
Right.
I mean, the only reason you could say it's not Barry Bonds is if you bring up the steroid issue. That's the only way. If you want to bring up the steroid issue, then you have to disqualify him altogether. Either count him or don't count him.
Right.
Okay? I know you, Mac. You're going to maybe attack him on that issue like a political candidate. Okay? So on. Either count him or we eliminate him. If I can't name him, I had to be told beforehand you're not allowed to name him. Because, I mean, come on. Barry Bonds, the all-time home run leader, 762 homers for his career, the all-time season leader, 73 homers in a year. I understand he was aided somewhat, just like pitchers are aided with spitballs, scuffing the ball.
Oh, let's not make that comparison, Jack. Let's not make that comparison. Go ahead.
When he was with the Pittsburgh Pirates, when there was no suspicion at all, what a great player he was with the Pirates, okay? We talk about five-tool players. He was the ultimate five-tool player. I mean, he could hit for average, okay. Hit for power, phenomenal. Had a great glove, could run. You know, I mean, he really did it all. I mean, 14-time All-Star, 8-time Golden Glover, okay? An MVP 7 times.
Yes.
7 times. I mean, that's phenomenal. Stole over 500 bases in his career. But what impressed me about Barry Bonds, he holds the record for season for walks. 232 times he walked during his career. And his on-base percentage, he holds the season on-base percentage with 609, meaning every 10 times he came to the plate, he got on base. You know, there hasn't been a better left fielder than Barry Bonds. And even Tim McCarver said Willie Mays used to be the greatest player he ever saw, but he deferred to Barry Bonds. But if you make the steroids an issue, then you can argue elsewhere. But if you're just going to take things on face value, there hasn't been a better left fielder.
Well, I agree with half of your debate, Jack. I agree when he was with the Pirates, he probably, if he stayed off steroids, he might have become the greatest left fielder of all time. But I'm going to tell you who really was. 19-time All-Star, lifetime batting average of 344, 521 home runs, all record for all time, 482 on-base percentage, 2,654 hits, 1,839 RBIs, two-time American League MVP, six-time batting champion, four-time home run leader, four-time RBI leader. And this man served in the military for 3 years, Jack.
What does that have to do with the type of player he is?
So, Ted Williams, I didn't even mention his name yet, Jack. I didn't even mention his name yet, Jack. The greatest left fielder of all time, Ted Williams. Ted Williams, Jack. Ted Williams was the man. He did everything excellent. He wasn't as great a fielder as Barry Bonds, and he did it without steroids, Jack. Imagine that. He didn't have a personal trainer, Jack. He didn't have all the technology that they've had. He didn't have any of that, Jack. He made his own baseball bats, Jack. That's what Ted Williams did. That was what Ted Williams did. He had an eye like nobody else. They said he could pick up the spin on the ball as soon as it came off the bat. His eyesight was unbelievable. And this is without all that extra stuff. No, he wasn't a Golden Glove winner. No, he wasn't. And Barry Bonds in his early years was a tremendous left fielder, a tremendous player. But I'm going to ask you one question, Jack. And the reason before I even get to the question, because Barry Bonds was walked was because he grew his head 3 sizes bigger than it was when he started playing. He had muscles upon muscles, Jack. He still had the quick bat.
You need a good eye to draw a walk. That's got nothing to do with
he was intentionally
good batting eye.
He wasn't intentionally walked, Jack. He was intentionally walked all those times. That's why he got all those walks. And let me tell you something else, Jack. When not only steroids increase your power, it increases your time to heal. And this is why steroids was such a big thing. If you tore a muscle, if you pulled a muscle, if you had aches, you took them steroids, Jack, and you were back out there again at full strength. Well, Ted Williams didn't have that, Jack. None of the old players had that. Billy Martin has nothing to do with Ted Williams.
Wait. He's a smart baseball man.
Yes, he is.
One of the smartest, Billy Martin. No one can deny that. Billy Martin said Ted Williams was not a great ball player. He was a great hitter. Ted Williams, you're saying, he wasn't a Golden Glover. He was a Golden Glover in reverse. He was terrible in left field.
He was down. Yeah, you're just
the man couldn't
crazy.
throw. He didn't run the bases well.
He didn't have to, Jack.
Hustle on the bases. He was
didn't have to.
Phenomenal hitter. He would
a phenomenal, Jack.
Today.
Phenomenal. Could you imagine, Jack? Could you imagine if he didn't take those 3 years off? He would have had over 2,000 RBIs. He would have had over 3,000 hitter. He would have had 600 home runs, Jack. He was. Let me ask you one question. It's the World Series. There's 2 outs. There's a man on second and third. Who do you want up there, Jack? Do you want Ted Williams or do you want Barry Bonds up there?
I want Ted Williams.
Thank you, Jack.
One at bat.
Thank you, Jack.
In his hand. But let me tell you something. For all 9 innings, Ted Williams is in the field. I'm going to be shaking. I'm going to be nervous. I'm going to tell my center fielder, bat towards left field because Ted needs help. Okay? Ted Williams himself, he used to be compared to Joe DiMaggio. That was his contemporary.
Right.
Who was better? That was a debate going on when the two played together. Right. Finally, Ted Williams admitted, DiMaggio is probably a better player than I was, but all I cared about was hitting. That was Ted Williams. He would be a DH today, and he would be happy to be a DH. He didn't work hard on the rest of his game.
The fielders I see out there today, Jack, he'd start left field on any team out there. I don't care. Right now, you're going to try
left field only if they didn't have a DH.
No, let me tell you, Jack.
He was not good defensively. He was poor defensively.
We're talking about all around. That's the position Ted Williams played, okay? And Ted Williams' head didn't get 3 sizes bigger than what is when he started. All Ted Williams did, he was a technician. He knew how to hit. He had power, just almost as much as Barry Bonds before Barry Bonds ended up having shoulders that was big as a truck. He had as much power as Bonds did when Bonds was playing without the use of steroids. He had a better batting average. He drove in. I think he might even have more runs drove in than Barry Bonds does. Home runs wise, he would have had over 600 home runs. If I have to field a team for 1 year and I had a choice between Barry Bonds playing in the outfield or Ted Williams all around, if I had a choice, Ted Williams would definitely be out there.
And I got to tell you an interesting thing about the two of them.
Yes.
Between both of them, as great as they were, they didn't win a World Series. They were never quite on a World Series winner. That's hard to believe.
Isn't it?
When we talk about the greatest players of all time who weren't on World Series winners,
That's
their
very
names
good.
should come to mind.
Very good. Very good
Yeah.
point. Very good point, Jack. So what we'll do, Jack, is we'll take a quick commercial break now. We'll be back, and we're going to be doing the greatest defensive tackle or nose tackle, and we're going to keep it local for that debate in the New York, Boston, Philly area. So that's what we're going to be doing next when we come back. Folks, stay with us. It should be very interesting, and we'll go ahead and we'll take our quick timeout here. And let me get to it, Jack. All right. Official timeout, baby. Let's get it rocking here and come back, folks.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Info Line. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma.
I love you too. Okay, how about tasting the stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again.
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Now we're getting killed. Not here. How come? Picked off the team. Didn't Tim tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I
I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, though, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Hi, and welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show, where we debate. Today is our debate show, our Saturday debate show. It's a lot of fun when me and Jack go at it and cover our different views and our opinions. We just did the greatest left fielders of all time. Both good arguments. Both were really great players, Jack. And we also had Dr. Paul Semendinger on from the sports blog. Start spreading the news. It's all about the Yankees. Very popular, and he's also is award-winning author of Scattering the Ashes. So another great guest on our show, Jack. Very knowledgeable man, and we'll go ahead and we'll push on with our next debate. I go first in this one, Jack, and we kept this debate local. I mean, there was a lot of different nose tackles and defensive tackles in the history of football that played really well. I mean, Rosie Greer comes to mind. Of course, you know, being a Giants fan, and the debate's over, Jack. So me being
I don't have that much to say on this.
Yes, we'll try and do the best we can as far as the time goes. Also, Jim Burt was incredible with the Giants during his time. So there's been some great ones. So I'm gonna go with the Jets. Nose tackle, defensive tackle, Joe Klecko. He was AFC Defensive Player of the Year in 1981. He went to 4 Super Bowls, part of the sack exchange during the 1980s that had Lyons and Gastineau were two of the linemen that played with him. One of the best defensive lines of the decade. In his first year, Jack, as a tackle, he led the league with 20 sacks, and that hasn't been heard of since Darnold has come and blessed us here with his latest career for the Rams. When he became a nose guard, Jack, he led the team in tackles with 96. That's normally something reserved for a linebacker who reads to the ball. So he was not only great in passing situations, but he was unbelievable against the run. He's and not only had 96 tackles that year, he also had 7.5 sacks from the nose guard position. He's the second player in NFL history, Jack, to be selected All-Pro in 3 different positions, the first one being Frank Gifford. The only thing that held him back was his knees, Jack, his knee injury that kept him off the field during his career. Hall of Fame guard Joe Delamore, who had blocked against Mean Joe Green and Merlin Olsen, said Klecko was just as good at his position as those 2 Hall of Famers. So Joe Klecko injured, but when he was healthy, Jack, he was dominant, and that's why I picked him as the greatest defensive tackle / nose guard in the New York, Boston, or Philly football.
Well, it's hard for me to argue against Joe Klecko being a Jet fan. The only thing I'll say, when you think of Joe Klecko, you think, at least I do, I think of him more as a defensive end, the sack exchange with Mark Gastineau. That's when Klecko was at his very best. Part of the reason he was so successful because he fed off Mark Gastineau as Mark Gastineau fed off him. So when you have really 2 dynamic pass rushers, I mean, it's hard to double team either guy.
Right.
Okay. So they're going to enjoy a little more success, but I can't argue that strongly against Joe Klecko. But I'm selecting more of a lunch pail type guy. Okay. Vince Wilfork anchored that Patriot defense for a number of years. He played 13 years in the NFL, most of them with New England. He was a Pro Bowler 5 times. Had he made it the one year he missed in 2008, it would have been 6 Pro Bowls in a row he would have made.
Yeah.
And he was as responsible as just about as anyone on the defensive side of the ball for New England during some of their glory years that they had. And with the Patriots, it was the offense that normally got the recognition. You'd always hear about, Brady, Gronk, Randy Moss, Edelman, the whole bit you'd be hearing, Wes Welker, and so on. The defense, not so much so. But Vince Wilfork was like the guy who put in a hard day's work, would come home, nothing glamorous about him at all. He wasn't one of these glamour players you'd watch on the NFL highlights where they would make a big deal about it. I mean, he would clog the middle up. The man would stop the run and at the same time contain the quarterback, if not sack him. Okay? Yeah. So for pure consistency, a man who did it on an extremely high level and was an impact player when he was in the game. He wasn't just consistent. He was an impact player virtually every game he played. As a nose tackle, they didn't come any better than Vince Wilfork.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, Jack. I think he's a great pick. I mean, if we went national with that, names like Joe Green, Alan Page, people like that would come up and probably might even be a little bit better on a higher scale than them two. But I mean, we've had our share of great tackles in even in Philly. If you look at their defense during the 90s, they had some great offensive linemen. They had Brown, they had Simmons, they had, and even
Mike Golick.
Even Mike Golick was a above average tackle to go along to make, again, as you say, they do a lot of things that make the Reggie Whites and make the great pass rushers do what they do, and they don't get a lot of credit. And Wilfork was also a big help to Teddy Bruschi. I mean, a little bit of an undersized linebacker that was quick and aggressive, but he did fill the gaps. And again, that's what the nose guard and defensive tackles do a lot. They do a lot of work in the trenches. So, I mean, I think your pick is great. I think Pleco was a fierce football player for his position in his time. So I think
it's not a glamorous thing to just containing the offense is so vital, but fans tend to look at sacks, sensational plays. They want to see someone get to the ball, but just someone like forcing a running back to cut another way for him, and then the running back gets tackled. The defender who forces the running back to change directions is never given any credit. But he's played a vital part in the play, and people don't see that a lot of times.
Yeah, they don't, because, again, as fans, we follow the football, and whoever makes the tackle is the one that we talk about. I mean, even to the great Lawrence Taylor, to some of the greatest outside linebackers in the league, if it wasn't for that defensive tackle / defensive end taking a double team or clogging the gap, a lot of these guys wouldn't have had a lot of successes they did. So that's pretty much it for our picks for the defensive tackle / nose guard position. We're going to go to the underrated coach, and I did something to Jack again this week that I did to him, talking about the greatest picture, and we'll get to that after he gives his pick. I know he's upset with me for taking this guy or not, but I consider it underrated. But go ahead, Jack.
No. A funny thing, I was thinking, who's the most underrated coach in history?
Right.
In sports. And I thought I'd be looking, to baseball, even though they're called manager, coaches, the same thing, football, basketball. I can't believe it. I wound up on hockey.
Yeah, there you go.
Hockey guy. Not that I'm not going to become one again. I was a hockey guy as a kid when they had 6 teams in the league.
Sure.
I used to wear number 7, Jean Bellevue of the Montreal Canadiens.
Wow.
I used to go to the park and play hockey. And there's a funny story. 4 of us used to play. The kid on my block picked me up, and we would ring the doorbell of 2 other kids, and they'd come to the park and play with us. And one of those other kids, I didn't know till years later, his name was Neil Merrin. Neil Merrin wound up producing the Academy Awards for a lot of years.
Wow.
You know, so he wound up being famous in his own right. And I didn't realize that till years later. But the most underrated coach of all time, no one talks about him, Scotty Bowman. Scotty Bowman coached for 30 years. 30 years, 29 full seasons, one part season. And the records he set have been off the wall. I mean, 30 years, the man didn't have a losing season in 30 years. And he took over teams that weren't that good. He has the most wins in NHL history, the most wins in the playoffs. And if you include what he did as a player, coach, and executive, he has 14 Stanley Cups. But we're just talking about as a coach, where he has 9. He coached from 1967 through 2002. Imagine lasting, that long. And he coached 5 teams over his career, and 3 of them he led to Stanley Cups. But let me tell you what he did with all 5 teams, how successful he was. He took over the St. Louis Blues when they first came into existence, and he coached them for 4 years. And in 3 of those years, he got them to the finals. The Montreal Canadiens, he coached for 8 years. All 8 years, they went to the finals and won 5 Stanley Cups. Then he goes to the Buffalo Sabres for 6 years. They didn't win a Stanley Cup, but they had the most regular season wins in the team's history with him as the coach. He coached the Pittsburgh Penguins for 2 years. He won a Stanley Cup the first year there. Then he sets a regular season record for the most points in the second year as Penguin coach. And then he finishes up his career with the Detroit Red Wings, coaches them for 9 years. They win 3 Stanley Cups. His .657 winning percentage is the best of all time. Phenomenal coaching. Why I say underrated, because when we talk about great coaches, no one seems to mention Scotty Bowman.
Yeah, that's a heck of an argument, Jack. I didn't, when you went to hockey, it surprised me, but I see why you did.
It surprised me, Mac. I didn't think I was going to go there. I'm doing researching. What am I missing here? Because normally we have obvious choices that they're going to jump at us.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, who could be underrated? And then I somehow thought of Scotty Bowman. I said, Scotty Bowman was a pretty good coach that no one talks about. And I checked into him further. I knew about a good amount of his success, but I didn't realize the complete impact of this man's success. And we don't talk about legendary coaches and Scotty Bowman.
Yeah,
we just don't.
Great pick, Jack. I'm going to go with somebody that was successful, but was kind of outshined. And it's the original Green Bay Packers coach, Curly Lambeau. Now, he was one of the founders of the National Football League. He saved Green Bay from going bankrupt and keeping a team up there. But as a coach, he had an unbelievable record of 229, 134, and 22. His winning percentage is .623. In any other circumstance, Jack, he would be highly regarded, would be one of the first coaches out of your mouth. But even when they talk about founding fathers of football, they talk about Papa Bear, George Halas. They talk about even Jim Thorpe. They don't even mention Curly Lambeau. I mean, I know why they don't mention him. He had probably, arguably, the greatest coach in Green Bay history that coached him, called Vince Lombardi. His contemporaries are even mentioned. You have George Halas, who was a great coach. You have Paul Brown, another outstanding, arguably one of the greatest coaches in history. But when you talk about the Green Bay Packers, I don't hear him talking about Curly Lambeau. They named the field after him, but guess what, Jack? They changed the name and they went back to it because he was the founder. But I don't give that all the credit because we have the FedEx Field. So they named
it's still Lambeau Field, right? Though?
Yes, it is. They renamed it after a while and made it Lambeau Field again. he had a unique way, and Green Bay has a unique way of running their team. They all own stock in the Green Bay Packers. They're all owners now, basically, of the Green Bay Packers. They buy season tickets, and that is considered almost stock, Jack, where you will sell your season tickets to somebody else to reserve that seat. Unbelievable way about running a football team, and they all have a say in who they hire and who they as coach, and they all have a say on free agency. Curly Lambeau set all this into motion, and his coaching, his playing ability, he was an all-pro. He was on championship teams as a player, as a coach, as a manager, and finally also as an owner. And I think that when we start talking about the greatest coaches in football history, we got to stop just thinking of Chuck Noll and Don Shula and Vince Lombardi and people like this. And we got to mention Curly Lambeau, at least mention him and give him the credit he's due. And that's why I call him one of the most underrated coaches in history, Jack.
Well, if the field wasn't named after him, more people, unfortunately, would be asking, who's Curly Lambeau? Like, if you mention his name, Lambeau Field might come into people's minds, but not the man himself. They'll say, Curly Lambeau, did he have anything to do with the field in Green Bay? You're right, absolutely. And when you look at his career, I mean, he should be rated amongst the best coaches in NFL history, but people don't talk about him.
And that has a lot to do, and it's not Vince Lombardi's fault, but it has a lot to do with the great Vince Lombardi and the Lombardi Trophy, and arguably the greatest coach.
Well, there was a little bit of a movement when Lombardi was in his heyday to name the field Lombardi Field.
Right.
But Green Bay, they resisted it, and they stuck with Lambeau Field, and that's and in all due respect to Vince Lombardi, he has a Super Bowl trophy named after him.
Definitely.
So
Definitely. I mean,
you don't need anything else. It's called the Lombardi Trophy.
Can you think
the field as Lambeau Field?
Can you think of any other coach in that position, Jack? I mean, any other coach that started was a great coach and then turned around and had somebody that was even maybe greater than him? I can't think of another one like that.
Chuck Noll was, well, Bill Cowher wasn't quite on the level of Chuck Noll, but Mike Tomlin is pretty good. He's headed there as far as I'm concerned.
I agree with that.
Another Super Bowl or two. Well, Chuck Noll won 4 Super Bowls in 6 years. But if you eliminate that block of success,
right?
You know, he didn't always have he wasn't quite on the same level as some of the other coaches.
I definitely
in my opinion. I mean, someone might beg to differ, but following.
I mean, it's
all a matter, really, of opinion. I mean, Bill Parcells won 2 Super Bowls, but Tom Coughlin followed with a couple. But most people would say Bill Parcells was a greater coach than Tom Coughlin. If you asked Giant fans and you took a poll, and the
only other one, Jack, I can really think of is maybe Casey Stengel, and you know, and you know, with the World Series that he won. And then, you know, then all the World Series we won in the 90s. I mean, I could see maybe, but I think Stengel still has the edge too with that. I mean, I think that I would consider Stengel probably the greatest manager of the Yankees. Would you?
I don't know. You know, Stengel was let go after they lost the 1960 World Series to the Pirates in 7 games on that Bill Mazeroski home run. In the next 2 years, the Yankees won the World Series. And they went to the World Series 4 years in a row, total after that. So, I don't know. I mean, in baseball, I hate to say, in certain cases, you can be a push-button manager. Like you said before, well, we could win with that team. Look, in baseball, good managers could squeeze out a few extra games, perhaps, over the course of the season to make a difference. I'm not saying they don't make a difference, a big difference in the way they handle a pitching staff and so on. But there have been a lot of cases where a manager's hailed as a mini genius and then he steps down as let go, and then the next year continuity continues. Take a look at that jumps out at me immediately, the Oakland Athletic team that won 3 World Series in a row, 72, 73, and 74. Dick Williams, Hall of Fame manager, managed 72, 73. but then quit because he couldn't take Charlie Finley. But the Athletics won the World Series in '74 with Alvin Dark being the manager.
That's very good point. So our next debate up, Jack, is the greatest sports broadcaster in the history of sports. You're up first, and go ahead and give us.
I was up first last one, but I'll go first again.
It's true. I can go first.
Big home team, Mac. You always have to get in the last word. It's called last licks. We always used to argue that as kids. We play stickball. We want to be up last. It would be called last licks.
Right.
Okay. And greatest sportscaster. This isn't my favorite sportscaster, who I necessarily think is the best. I'm going to cop out a little bit here, the way Magic Johnson copped out. When they asked him who is the greatest basketball player of all time, they asked him between Jordan and LeBron. Now, Magic was kind of a contemporary of Jordan's in a way, even though Magic was on the downside of his career when Michael, came up in his peak. And so when Michael actually hit his stride.
Right.
And of course, LeBron James signed with the Lakers in large part because Magic Johnson recruited him. So Magic was in a tough spot. He said, Michael Jordan is the greatest basketball player of all time, but LeBron James is the best all-around basketball player.
Wow, that is a cop-out, definitely.
And so he gave both guys a bone. He says, Michael Jordan. He says, Michael, I said you were the greatest of all time. And LeBron could take solace. Well, I have the best all-around game.
Sure.
Sure. Interesting way of putting it. To me, the best all-around announcer of all time was Al Michaels.
Okay.
But the greatest broadcaster of all time was Howard Cosell. Not because of Howard Cosell's technique. Okay? He obviously wasn't as good as Al Michaels and a bunch of other guys, but he was iconic. He was a force. He had more impact than any broadcaster in history. He broadcast the century over 30 years. We've had broadcasters that have went, over 50 years. What Cosell meant to Monday Night Football, for example, he could go all the way. Chris Berman's even imitating him to this day. He made Monday night into a phenomenon, with the routine he had with Danny Don Meredith. And Monday Night Football was, a part of American culture here because of Cosell. People couldn't wait to listen to him. He was the most despised announcer, Howard Cosell. But it's like you hated the guy, but you had to watch him. Okay? The shtick he had with Muhammad Ali, the routine that they had, Cosell would always come off as the villain. The banter that would go back and forth. They loved it. His calls, down goes Frazier, down goes Frazier. And Cosell wasn't the most knowledgeable guy. Dick Young used to savage Cosell in his columns, the way they'd go back and forth. But people imitate Howard Cosell to this day. He was obnoxious. He was brash. A buddy of mine who was a cabbie, Mac, picked him up once in his taxi, and he couldn't believe it because my buddy was a phenomenal sports fan. And he wants to talk sports with Howard Cosell. And Howard Cosell says, can't we change the topic and talk about peace in the Middle East? Because Cosell was fed up with sports. My buddy says, I don't get to pick up Howard Cosell, my cab each day. But the greatest broadcast of all time, the one with the most impact, was Howard Cosell.
Well, to me, Jack, Howard Cosell was a clown. He was all about Howard Cosell. That's all Howard Cosell was. He wasn't even a sports broadcaster. He was a Howard Cosell broadcaster. Ali made Cosell famous. And you talk about Monday Night Football. Monday Night Football was unique in the way that it had almost 30 to 40 more cameras than a regular football game. They made it out to be a bonanza, a show. And Howard, yes, was an integral part of Monday Night Football. And yeah, people did despise him, and people did like to watch him just to make fun of him or just to hate on him. I agree with that. I would say Howard Cosell is the most popular broadcaster in the history of sports. But as far as the best, Jack, it's got to be Vin Scully. Vin Scully started his broadcasting career with the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1950 and continued with the LA Dodgers until 2016. He was a play-by-play announcer. He worked Major League Baseball, NFL football, and the PGA Tour, employed by CBS Sports, NBC Sports. He won the Ford C. Fritch Award and NBC for award for broadcasting, the Commissioner's Historic Achievement Award, the Presidential Medal of Honor, and even has a star on the Hollywood Hall of Fame, believe it, the star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He was born in the Bronx, a huge New York Giants baseball team fan. He found FM radio station at his college at WFUV at Fordham University. At 23, he became the youngest person to broadcast a World Series game. He had a brief stint with the Yankees, then went to LA. In 1967, Dodger fans voted him the most memorable personality. He called the catch in the San Francisco-Dallas championship game, as if you remember the Montana to Dwight Clark catch in the back of the Super Bowl. He called Kirk Gibson's home run while he was hurt, and he made that legendary home run to win the game. The Buckner era versus the Mets, where the ball went through Buckner's legs. He had everything from famous ex-players to other famous sports broadcasters he teamed up with. Now, Howard Cosell made outrageous statements, Jack. He was about Howard Cosell, very, very popular, very controversial. Ali said he wishes Cosell was a fire hydrant. He was a dog. He was inducted into the America's Sports Casters Hall of Fame in the Sportscaster Association, and a Major League Baseball Network named him the top broadcaster of all time. Now, listen, I agree with what you're saying about Cosell. He was the most popular. They imitate him today. He had that big cigar he was smoking, calling halftime reels. He was quite an event. But as far as sports go, Jack, if I had to have somebody call a game for me or someone with knowledge of that game that they're playing, I definitely pick Vin Scully and not Howard Cosell.
Vin Scully made his mark strictly in baseball. I know he did other sports, but he didn't have much of an impact. We hardly know that he did other sports, Vin Scully, like golf and football. We hardly remember that. Listen, this isn't a popularity contest. You're asking me whose company I would rather have been in if I had to work as an intern on the Vin Scully or Howard Cosell. I'd rather be with Vin Scully. I'd rather, if I had to take a car ride and go somewhere a couple hours and talk, I'd rather hang out with Vin Scully. He strikes you as a consummate gentleman. Cosell is a brash, egotistical guy. It's easy to root for Vin Scully. Vin Scully, who's still alive, I mean, he had arguably the most phenomenal career, a phenomenal run as a sportscaster with one particular team. No other broadcaster had the run that Vin Scully had with the Dodgers with their team. Not quite.
Yeah.
You had some, but people today talk about Howard Cosell. Howard Cosell was entertainment itself.
Very true.
And a lot of times the games might be a little boring, but Howard Cosell was on there. They had him doing baseball at night. Cosell didn't know that much about baseball. I remember Dick Young wrote in his column once, and Dick Young and Howard Cosell hated one another. He writes down Howie exposed. He says, Dick Young wrote, everyone knows baseball, about baseball. They have knowledge of it. And Howie doesn't, and everyone could see that. And the media hated Howard Cosell, and he was one of them.
Yes.
He was one of them. There was a certain jealousy. And people just talk about Howard Cosell today in every, way, shape, and form. And technically speaking, of course, Vince Scully was a better technical broadcaster than Howard Cosell, like a number of other guys. You know, we should give a little honorable mention. I mentioned Al Michaels, who would have been a good choice. I think you would have preferred that choice. There's another choice that, you know, in the rear end too. Let's consider Marv Albert, you know, as well. Yeah. Marv Albert, Marv Albert's still around. I listened to him call the Knick games when I was in high school. Knicks would score a basket, Marv Albert would yell, yes. That would be his trademark call. Yes. You know, so there's a lot of good ones out there.
If that wasn't found out about that dressing scandal he had there, I think that really blew him out of the water.
He came back, but never with the same, quite the same impact.
That was a public, embarrassment. I can't imagine. The only thing I remember about Cosell on Monday night, and of course, I'm a huge Fran Tarkenton fan. Cosell came out when Tarkenton was playing and said he would never go to the Super Bowl. He would never be a great quarterback, a scrambling quarterback, would never win in the NFL. And then Fran Tarkenton happened to go on a Monday night run with Cosell and he was calling him Sir Francis. So that's how much of a I don't know. Cosell to me reminds me of I think he started this whole look at me announcer where I'm the show, not the sport. And I don't disagree with you as far as popularity goes, Jack. He's, like you say, they still imitate him today. But I never really liked Cosell as far as a broadcaster went. As far as a show, he was okay.
Cosell would shove it down your throat. He'd say, this is Howard Cosell telling it like it is.
Yeah, that's right.
Some people hated that.
Right.
And they would get into it, and the media would be attacked. The media was making their fellow media member a lot bigger than what he was. They were like attacking him, making him dynamic. Howard Cosell was great for ratings. Howard Cosell was a jealous, egotistical guy, too. The 1972 Olympics, Jim McKay had that famous call when the Israeli athletes tragically were killed.
Yeah.
Cosell felt he should have been switched on the air. Never mind that no one could have handled it better than Jim McKay.
Very true.
Look, Al Michaels, when he was doing the World Series in 1988 with the Giants, 1989, I think it was, with the Giants and the Oakland Athletics, in which they had that earthquake going on.
Right.
And
I remember that.
Al Michaels handled the broadcasting duties. He couldn't have prepared for an earthquake.
That's the truth.
To be talking, analyzing the city, the town. That showed the greatness of Al Michaels. But Cosell is the one they talk about. People even to this day are intrigued about Howard Cosell. If HBO, for example, was going to do a big documentary on any sportscaster, okay, they do documentaries, who would they pick?
Yeah.
They pick Cosell with all the material and everything.
I think there's been a movie about Cosell, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, listen, Howard Cosell is probably will go down in history as one of the most, if not the most popular.
I think influential too.
I don't know about influential.
The influence he had when the NFL when Al Davis was suing the NFL,
right.
In the antitrust thing, Pete Rozelle would be going to Cosell's apartment, giving him papers and everything, trying to win Cosell over because they knew the influence that Cosell kind of wielded at the time. But when Cosell, at the end of his career, his last years were kind of sad. When he was out of the media, he'd be coming back. People didn't like him.
Yeah,
he burned bridges, and
a lot of bridges.
He wasn't the nicest man.
Okay?
The nicest man, and he was a bit of a user. I kind of wonder, was he really that fond of Ali? I know I saw him at a banquet towards the end of Cosell's life. Him and Ali were there. They were both physically compromised at that point. And I remember Cosell saying, "I love you, Muhammad." The whole world knows that. I'm sure Cosell was fond of Ali.
Yeah.
But, that close relationship. And Ali was fond of Cosell. but he didn't have a lot of friends, Cosell. He just
I
didn't.
I think they both used each other. I don't think Ali needed Cosell as much as Cosell needed Ali, to be honest with you, because of you figure when you're calling Ali's fights, Ali was very entertaining. Cosell was entertaining. It kind of went together, but I think Cosell needed Ali a lot more than Ali needed Cosell for sure.
Well, Cosell left the sport of boxing, Mac, as you might recall.
Right.
The last fight he did was Larry Holmes, Tex Cop. He savaged the sport. How terrible it was. He was the sport's worst enemy. But guess what? What people don't remember, that was his last professional fight. The 1984 Olympics. At the last moment, Cosell wants to broadcast.
Right.
To broadcast boxing.
Sure.
And he's making excuses. He said, well, amateur boxing is really pure. So that's okay. He was being hypocritical at that point. And Cosell left boxing after he made all his moolah. Okay?
Definitely. I definitely agree with that. Jack, do we have any more topics after that last one?
We were going to be talking about drafting, whether a team should draft according to need or to draft the best player available.
Right?
Talk about the best team. Man,
so
you're really prepared today, Mac.
Yes. Well, I just
really
wanted to
prepared. I mean, you remind me of a play. You did this, I heard, when you played too. I don't believe it was, what I heard, that you came in for a game you actually hung over the night before. And you're a young man and had to play.
Lord.
I don't know, is that true?
It could be true, Jack. So I just wanted to make sure that we had those other two lined up. I do have a new bit that I want to try with you a little bit too later on. It's called Who's Better. So we're going to give that we're going to give that a go. Nice. And we'll be back, folks, after this commercial break. Please stay with us, and we'll be back on the other side.
Thanks.
Okay, let's do it.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
When you hear the word asthma, you probably think of shortness of breath, coughing, or inhalers. Lots of things can trigger asthma, but the fact is that asthma doesn't just attack, it can kill. But with proper medical management, asthma is controllable. If you experience shortness of breath, wheezing, tightness in your chest, or persistent nighttime coughing, you may have asthma. See your doctor and get the facts. You'll breathe easier. For more information, call 211 Info Line. A message from the Connecticut Department of Public Health, keeping Connecticut healthy.
Hi, Grandma. What's for dinner?
Hey, honey, I'm making stew tonight.
Ooh, can Nina come over?
I'm not sure about our new friend. I wonder if there's been any drinking going on. Alcohol at her age can lead to so many bad things. I've been meaning to ask you, what would happen if someone offered you a drink?
Grandma?
This is hard. She's so young, but I know I need to talk to her about it now before someone tries to give her alcohol. If anyone ever does offer you a drink, I want you to say no. I have too much respect for my family, and I don't want to get in trouble.
Okay.
Really?
I promise, Grandma. I love you too.
Okay, how about tasting this stew and telling me what you think?
Some children may try alcohol as young as 9 years old. It's not too early to talk about drinking. For tips on how to begin the conversation, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. That's underagedrinking.samhsa.gov. This message brought to you by SAMHSA and this station.
We all make choices. When it comes to alcohol, kids make choices whether to drink or not.
Bye-bye.
Remember, I'm going to Alex's party tonight and sleeping over.
Hey, have a seat for a second. Remind me about that party again.
And adults make choices whether to talk about it. That's true of parents and every other trusted adult in a kid's life. Kids want to know our expectations when it comes to alcohol and other drugs. They want guidance and honest answers to their questions. And it makes a difference when the message is consistent and part of everyday conversations. So talk with your kids and help lead them on a positive path. Because when you talk, they hear you. For more information about talking with your kids about underage use of alcohol and other drugs, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
If you talk and they will hear you every single time.
Oh, we're getting killed. Yeah, well, Kyle's not here.
How come?
Kicked off the team. Didn't Timmy tell you? Kyle and some other kids got caught drinking beer in the park a couple of nights ago.
Really?
Yeah. Zero tolerance. He's out for the season.
Come on, it's a first offense, right?
That we know of. But why should that matter? He knew not to drink. I made it clear to Matt that's what we expect from him. What have you said to Tim?
Nothing really. You know, a lot of kids try it at this age, so.
Yeah, well, a lot of kids don't try it too. I'm not saying that Matt's going to be this perfect kid, but if I don't tell him what we expect and why he shouldn't drink, how's he going to know?
You think kids that age really listen?
They never admit it, Bill, but they hear more than you think.
Talk. They hear you. For more information about talking with kids about underage drinking, visit underagedrinking.samhsa.gov.
Try.
How we doing, everybody? And welcome back to the Mac and Jack Sports Show. We're on Wednesday through Sunday, 8 to 10. We're here covering all your local sports from the New York, Boston, and Philly area. Today is our debate show, and every Saturday, me and the great Jack Hirsch, we get together and we debate some of the biggest topics and people in the history of sports, especially when we can in the local area. Today we had on Dr. Paul Semendinger, who was a great analyst for the Yankees and great in baseball all around. He has a lot of knowledge in that. He has a popular sports blog called Start Spreading the News, very popular about the Yankees, their history updates, and different kind of events that happened and that do happen currently with the Yankees. Writes a lot of articles, a lot of op-eds, and he's just great all-around guest, Jack. I mean, it's a pleasure to have him on every week. Another writer like yourself, and I know you got to respect that somebody that actually gets a book published and wins a couple awards for it. And I know you do a lot of boxing writing over at boxingnewslive.net. Am I saying that right, Jack?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so we do have our website up. It's at macandjacksports.com called Max Insiders. I do have a link currently, just updated it into Jack's profile, where you can go to the Boxing News online, check out the homepage. Jack is one of the senior writers over there. He's been writing for decades. Very well respected writer in the boxing, and honestly, Jack is very well versed in all sports. Has a lot of friends in sports, and I'm thankful that he's on co-hosting the show with me.
You know, it's funny, Mac. I was listening to that last commercial. We played it a number of times with underage drinking. And you talk about drinking any age like that, getting intoxicated is awful. It's dangerous, so on. Yeah. But we were just talking about Howard Cosell. And Howard Cosell, and this is a big negative. He had to leave the booth during a Monday night game because he had drunk too much and became sick. They said, well, he was sick. They didn't say the reason why.
Right.
But can you imagine in this day and age, any broadcaster has to leave the game altogether, and that's
right.
It. I forgot at what point of the game Cosell left and couldn't work anymore because he was hungover. And I can't imagine anyone around in this day and age that would survive it, because especially with social media, we get hold of it. But at the time, Cosell was kind of able to keep it under wraps.
Yeah.
But today, everything gets out.
You know, as I told you, my dad was a huge Yankee fan. And I still, believe it or not, he listens to Yankees on the radio. I still do that. It's one of my favorite sports to listen to on the radio. As far as sports go, because they have to you get to know the sportscasters, because there's a lot of time in between pitches or innings and stuff like that. And I still listen to the Yankees today on radio whenever I get a chance. I'd rather listen to it on radio than watch it on TV, to be honest with you. I think it's more exciting on radio. But my father told me about Mel Allen, and they had a commercial about, there was an ale. I can't remember the ale he was talking about during the show. And from what I gathered from what my father was telling me was that he would drink the ale during the broadcast, and at the end of the game, he would kind of start slurring his words. So I don't know if that's true or if that's false, but it was kind of amusing to me that.
You want to know something? Mel Allen was an iconic Yankee broadcaster, yes, but he was let go, and no one could ever understand why. And he wouldn't get rehired. And maybe that was it. Maybe in that day and age, when a guy had an issue, they let him go. They didn't want to belabor the point. There wasn't outside pressure coming from the media demanding answers. I know Red Barber, that worked with Mel Allen, he was let go. The Yankees had a game, and I kid you not, they were playing the Red Sox late in the season. The Yankees were off during the stretch that they were awful.
Right.
They had 423 people in the stands.
Wow.
423 people. And Red Barber said the place is empty. You know, he said the stands were empty. And that really ticked off Yankee management for him to mention that. And he was let go. And it's interesting, iconic broadcasters like Mel Allen and Red Barber to be let go, the way they were.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, the ale comes to my mind. I think it was either Ballantine Ale or Valentine Ale, something like that.
Ballantine beer. That was Mel Allen's thing. Ballantine beer.
Right. So he would.
A quiz for you. Trivia question. One drinking. What was the Mets beer called when they started, the big one?
I won't even try and fake it, Jack. I don't know.
Okay, Schaefer beer.
Oh, Schaefer, yeah.
It used to be their thing.
The one
Yankees Ballantine beer.
The one beer to have.
They did that Ballantine beer so good, the commercials. I was a kid and I wanted to get a Ballantine beer, and I was never liked drinking as a kid or as an adult.
Right.
I wanted the Ballantine beer.
My dad's beer drinking was Schaefer, believe it or not.
Was he a Met fan?
No, he was a Yankee fan, but it is the one beer to have when you're having more than one, Jack. I remember. And you needed more than one to get used to the taste of Schaefer, to be totally honest with you.
Yeah.
So anyway, so you were talking about Cosell on Monday night, and I remember, he got along great with Danny Don Meredith there, the singer.
Oh, yeah, being sarcastic, right?
Right, but
Danny Don did not like Cosell at all.
And I don't think Frank Gifford was too fond of him either, to be honest with you.
Well, Frank Gifford was you know what ticked off Cosell? That Frank Gifford and Danny Don were close personal buddies, okay?
Right.
And they would go out after the game. And there was, and one time they saw Cosell, said, "What are you guys doing?" And they had already had plans, and Cosell was there. And Gifford said, "You're welcome to join us, Howard."
Right.
And he saw the close relationship. And the part of Cosell craved that. He wanted to hang out with them, be buddies. But you were right what you said before. Cosell was about Cosell.
Yeah, he was the show.
First and foremost.
Yeah.
If he was an athlete, he would be an eye guy all the way.
Oh, yeah, he's a wide receiver, Jack. He's a wide receiver.
But part of it, too, keep this in mind, there was contempt going on. Meredith's feeling was, and Gifford's to an extent, even though Gifford wouldn't say it, Cosell never played the game. So what the heck is this guy talking about football like he knows the ins and outs? Cosell's logic was, these guys aren't real broadcasters. I am. I went to broadcast school.
Sure.
That's where like a little bit of a conflict came in. And Cosell didn't like that Danny Don Meredith won an Emmy Award.
Right.
And he was furious. He thought he should have won an Emmy Award, Cosell. And Cosell was right, but Cosell was so despised.
Yeah.
How would you feel at Mac if I won an Emmy for doing this show?
Oh, I feel great for you.
Yeah, come on. You'd be a little
honestly,
you know.
not at all. Not at all. In fact,
you'd say the company line, oh, I'm real happy for Jack, and then you'd mumble.
Not at all, Jack. I'd be happy as hell for you, honest to God, because
no, it's not coming my way, Max.
Yeah, well, I heard rumors, Jack. I've heard rumors. So let's get back to the debates real quick. As you brought up, and rough night last night, but our next debate is to whether to draft out of need or the best player. And I'm going to go first on this, Jack, since you went first the last couple of times. There is one standard that I look to when I went ahead and made my argument about that. Well, really two. The New England Patriots. The New England Patriots are the most successful team in the history of football by far, going to 6 Super Bowls. Going to 9 Super Bowls and winning 6, dominating their division for 2 decades. What Bill Belichick has done there, and not that you can always, you're going to hear people say, well, he changes the game plan for each game. All this nonsense. Listen, Bill Belichick has a system he runs there. It's a very organized, very disciplined system. And he can change that system because his base system is that way. He expects certain things from his players. No one is treated any different. No one gets praise. He may go a little easier in his scolding of players, but he is the ultimate example of a system and drafting for needs. Next year, if they need a defensive tackle more than they need a quarterback, Jack, don't be surprised that Bill Belichick drafts a defensive tackle. That's how he thinks. He thinks of the team first. He thinks of the overall team. He doesn't think of, as you can see on his team right now, he has no weapon as a wide receiver because Bill Belichick believed, right or wrong, that that's not what he needed this year. What he needed was whatever he drafted. He stockpiles draft picks, Jack. He takes his first rounds. He takes his second rounds and trades for more draft picks down at the bottom of the rounds because he trusts that much in his system. He trusts that much in his scouting team. He knows what he needs to do to win. He knows what he needs to do to make the team successful. Now, you can go out there and you can get the most talented running back, and if you have a terrible offensive line, it really doesn't matter. You can get the best quarterback available, as we've seen in the past. You can get a Joe Burrows. And maybe 3 years from now, Joe Burrows is going to the Super Bowl, Jack. But if he doesn't have a system that is designed to support him, that has a good offensive line, that has a good defense, that has a good field goal kicker, a good punter, Joe Burrows is not going to the Super Bowl, Jack. He's going to be a good quarterback on a decent team. So when you look at a team, Jack, especially in a team sport, you have to look, I think, first at your needs. What do you need? What holes do you need to fill? As you see by the Giants this year, Jack. They drafted Daniel Jones. They thought, well, he's going to be the next Eli Manning. And their offensive line was terrible. So then they decided to turn around and go the opposite way and draft an offensive line after they drafted their quarterback. I think that any quarterback in the league that is a professional, that is halfway decent, can win with a great offensive line and a great system that is built for him to fit into. Again, Ryan Tannehill, another great example. With the Miami Dolphins, terrible. He goes to the Tennessee Titans. There's a system in place to use play-action pass, and Ryan Tannehill flourishes. And he was thought to be no good, Jack. So I really believe that you may want to get the best player available at a position, maybe, if that's what your system needs. And you can go to college, Jack, and you can see what they did in Alabama, what they're doing right now in Clemson. They have a system in place where when they get these recruits in, they not only draft a good player, but they draft because of what their idea or what that system should be or what that scheme of that system will be. So, in my opinion, Jack, you've got to get what you need first and then go get your great athlete.
If all factors are equal, are very close to being equal, yeah, of course you want to go to the position that you're more in need of, okay? And when we talk draft, we talk about every sport that has a draft, okay? Not just football. We think of football when the word draft comes up a little more so than the other sports. But you want to get the best player available. You know, I can recall the most disastrous pick according to need in the history of sports was when the Portland Trailblazers were going second overall in the draft. Houston takes Hakeem Olajuwon, which was the most logical pick. He played for the University of Houston. They knew he was going to be a great player, and he turned out to be everything they hoped he would be.
Right.
Portland was going next. They had a choice, Sam Bowie or Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was the better player, but no, Portland needed the big man. They needed the center. They drafted according to need. It was an awful pick. I felt that way at the time. It was an awful pick. I'm not saying so after.
Right.
And what happened? Sam Bowie turned out to have a okay career. He was hurt a lot. If he wasn't hurt, he would have conceivably been a perennial all-star, but he wouldn't have been in the league of Michael Jordan, who at the very worst was one of the all-time greats, at the very worst, okay? And you mentioned before the Miami Dolphins, you mentioned Ryan Tannehill, according to need. Bill Parcells, who you respect as one of the greatest coaches ever, he drafted Jake Long with the #1 overall pick in the draft instead of Matt Ryan, who went 3rd overall. Matt Ryan was there for him because he needed an offensive lineman, okay, at that time. And he should have went with really the quarterback at the time. And it's, I mean, maybe you know, I'm bolstering your argument a little bit here, Mac. Maybe I'm bolstering your argument a little bit because Jake Long was a heck of a player. You could argue he was better at his position than Matt Ryan was at his. But the point is, I believe you only go with need when there's such a glaring hole there and you're going to get an impact player. You go with the best guy available, and then you can work it out. You could shift them around, or you could trade someone for additional picks or for additional players. But I believe you go with the most value, like the Giants did. They needed a quarterback. They took Saquon Barkley. Okay? Right. If they didn't take Saquon Barkley, who would they have gotten? Baker Mayfield was already taken. So they would have had Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, or Josh Rosen. And the word was they probably liked Josh Rosen a little better than Josh Allen. So chances are they would have either taken Darnold or Josh Rosen. And would they have been any better off than Saquon Barkley? I think.
Well, what I heard, their second choice at quarterback was the one playing for Denver right now. In fact, there was talk if Denver, if
Brulak was the 6th quarterback taken in that draft, he was Lamar Jackson was
right.
5th.
If Denver did not take Drew, if they didn't take him, there was talk that the Giants were going to draft him with their next pick. That's what the talk was. That was a rumor. So they were going to take Jones and then follow up and take him and have them battle it out. And trade one of them. That was a rumor that I heard before the draft. Jack, I understand what you're saying to a point where, okay, let's talk about the Jets for a second. They may not win a game this year, Jack. So they got their first pick. And they got Trevor Lawrence on that's the first pick that's arguably going to go. So do you take Trevor Lawrence and your defense stinks and your offense is not competing, or do you take Trevor Lawrence and do you trade that and get more draft picks or free agents? I think they need a lot over the Jets. They already have a decent quarterback, and they can win with Darnold. They can win with him.
I have a better one. You mentioned the Jets. They needed a quarterback when Matt Leinart was there ready to be drafted.
Right.
Everyone wanted them to draft Matt Leinart, but the best player available was actually a guard, DeBrickashaw Ferguson.
Right.
And so they drafted Ferguson instead of Leinart, and they needed a quarterback.
Well, Leinart didn't work out too well.
Ferguson turned out to be one of the better Jet players in history.
Right. And Matt Leinart
turned out to be no more than a career backup.
Yeah, that's very true. I think, and this is probably coming from coaching at lower levels, Jack, because you don't have the advantage of recruiting or drafting. You just got to work with what you got. And when I found, especially in basic, and I talk about the NFL draft because besides basketball, they make an impact right away. If you talk baseball, you're going to talk years before you see them. Hockey too, they may not develop for quite a while, going to their the farm teams. So probably football and basketball, a draft is more important because they can play almost right away. So that's why I brought up NFL. But at the lower levels of coaching, you can't do that. You got what you have, and you do have maybe 2-3 great athletes, but what I found when I took over programs that were losing was they would take the best athletes and put them at running back instead of taking the best athletes and maybe put them at offensive guard. And what I found was the system always won, especially at the lower levels. Maybe not so much on pro. I think it does, as I pointed out with the Patriots and a couple other teams right now. I'll throw the Titans in there right now, that use a system more than they do. More than they value, the most athletic guy. And once that system is, and it can develop, it can over time, it can grow into something different. But you've got to have that base system to see what you got, to know what you're doing. It's easier to coach. It's easier to manage. It's easier to scheme. And then as you grow, you take your athletes and you do what you want with them. But anyway, and I do agree with a lot of your points too about the best player. I mean, Saquon Barkley may be a bust. We don't know if he gets injured again or if he can't play for another. We don't know what will happen, but that happens.
But that's out of control. That's out of everyone's control. If a player's career doesn't work out because he's been injured and can't get on the field, it's not like you calculated the wrong way.
Right.
Okay, you judge the guy's value, how good he's going to be. And Saquon Barkley was the rookie of the year.
I agree.
He already proved he was a good pick. He was the best player. He performed better than anyone else in the draft. Baker Mayfield had an excellent rookie year, and he hasn't been the same since. So
very true. Very true.
You don't know.
It's always there's always some luck involved in that. So, Jack, you go ahead and start off our last debate, and I'm going to try to get who's better in there before we get off the air.
Listen, it's funny when we talk about the best teams of all time. Wow, we're talking about one season.
Right.
We're talking about one season, and we're not talking about statistically one team may have had one more win than the other, and so on. And they're number teams. You could look at the various sports. It's so hard to tell. If I want to go into amateur/professional hockey, I could dig up one of the Russian teams, for example, that was near invincible on the hockey circuit. But I'm going to go with and I'm partial to this, the 1998 New York Yankees. After they lost their first 3 games, they were 114-45 the rest of the season. They didn't have legendary players for the most part, but the consistency on that team was unlike any other. I mean, they had their pitching staff. How would we love to have it today for the Yankees? David Cohn, David Wells, Andy Pettit, El Duque. Their bullpen was like a steel door trying to get through. If you think you could get through their middle relievers, Mike Stanton and Jeff Nelson, I mean, elite middle relievers. And then you get to Mariano Rivera closing it out. I mean, they turned it into a 6-inning game like night after night. And their everyday lineup was so consistent offensively, defensively. You had Derek Jeter, Jorge Posada, Bernie Williams, Paul O'Neill, Tino Martinez, Chuck Knobloch. Yet coming off the bench, I mean, Tim Raines, Darryl Strawberry as reserve players. And those guys were still good when they were with the Yankees. Still very, very good. And it reflected in the playoffs. I mean, they swept the first round. Then the Indians, they blew a game and they fell behind 2-1, but then came back and easily won the next 3 and then swept the San Diego Padres in the World Series. And you're going to find some teams in baseball you could say were conceivably just as good, you could point out. But I think if they ever played this Yankee team head on, no one could match this Yankee team's bullpen. The starters were outstanding, but
Definitely
especially
agree.
the bullpen. It was the best all-around balanced team, I think, of all time in any sport.
Yeah, I agree that that team was awesome. And I'm doing an okey doke on you, Jack. I was originally going to go with the 1927 Yankees, and what a great team it was. But
Yeah.
since you took the Yankees and you got baseball, I'm going to go to my wheelhouse, which is football, real quick on you.
Mhm.
I think the most dominant team in the history of sports was the 1985 Bears, Jack. I mean, this team, they got beat once by the Dolphins, and pretty much I think that was their down game. I mean, and to lose to Marino and the way it was played and when it was played, I don't even count that against them. The 85 Bears were unstoppable. Their defense was probably next to the Steelers and maybe the 86 Giants, the greatest defense that ever was ever assembled. They would maul you. Their defensive line with Dent and Michaels, their front four was unbelievable. Their linebacking crew was fast and smart. Their defensive backfield turned the ball over back to the offense if they weren't scoring touchdowns. They thoroughly dominated almost every team they played. The Mike Ditka leading the way with Buddy Ryan and that vaunted 46 defense that was coming at you full speed at all time. They were so aggressive that the other teams almost didn't stand a chance against them. On offense, they didn't have the greatest offense in the world, Jack. They did have Walter Payton. That was kind of in the highlight, the heyday, getting a little past his prime. Still played great receiver, one of the greatest running backs of all time. McMahon was a character. He was a good quarterback. He played not only for the Bears and the Eagles. I don't think he's ever going to make the Hall of Fame, but he was a great starting quarterback. They had some very good wide receivers, not great wide receivers. And who can forget about the Super Bowl Shuffle, Jack? I mean, they had a lot of fun with what they were doing. They put that video out there, and they knew they were the best in football. And when they went and played the Patriots didn't stand a chance, Jack. It was over before the game started. You could say the Miami Dolphins team is still the only has the only perfect season in football. But I'm telling you right now, pound for pound, if you put the Bears against the Dolphins at their best and the Bears at their best, Miami at their best, there's no doubt in my mind the Bears would have beat the Dolphins because the Dolphins were not the most.
I agree with you, Mac. I agree completely. I would vote for the Bears as the greatest single-season NFL team I ever saw.
Yeah,
we agree completely. The Dolphin year that they went unbeaten, they played 3 playoff games. They won their 3 playoff games by a total of 17 points.
Right.
They weren't dominant. They did beat a good Pittsburgh Steelers team.
Yes,
they were losing to a mediocre Cleveland Brown team with 8 minutes to go, and they won by 6 points. And then they beat the Redskins in the Super Bowl, and they were not as good as the Chicago Bears, point blank. If we had a betting line, I would take the Bears and give 10 points.
Yes, I agree. Not to take anything.
You mentioned Buddy Ryan and Mike Ditka. That's not the reason. Those guys were feuding.
Yeah.
They hated one another. And Buddy Ryan, with his 46 defense with the Bears, it was funny. Buddy Ryan was the most arrogant guy of all. Arrogant guy of all. And Rex Ryan picked that up to a smaller degree, trying to boast because he was his son. And, you pick up things from your parents. Buddy Ryan would say people didn't know what the heck they were doing. Buddy Ryan was given this opportunity by the Jet coach, Weeb Ewbank. He loved Weeb Ewbank. He was an assistant under Weeb Ewbank. Weeb Ewbank gave Buddy Ryan a lot of responsibility. And so he always loved Weeb Ewbank. So when Buddy Ryan became head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, he brought Weeb Ewbank to training camp.
You mean
to help out with the players? And they asked him about a certain formation. Why would they? And Buddy Ryan said, why the hell would we ever run this? It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. And one of the reporters said, but Weep Eubank thinks it would be a good idea. And all of a sudden, Buddy Ryan was stunned, stopped in his tracks. He said, maybe, we could try it out. Sometimes stuff like this could work. And they said, but you just said it was ridiculous. And then Buddy Ryan said, well, if Weep says it, it's good enough for me.
There you go.
I kind of always got a kick out of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I don't think Buddy Ryan was he was an okay head coach. He wasn't great by any means. But, man, he was
mediocre.
He was colorful, and boy, he hated Jimmy Johnson. Bill Parcells couldn't stand him.
They made the playoffs 3 years
ago.
They
did.
But he wasn't special as a head coach. It was more hype than anything. He was, he did a great job with the Bears with their 46 defense.
Definitely, I agree with that, and I've never seen a team dominate like that for one season. So we got a new big guys. We're doing who's better, and this is where I asked the great Jack Hirsch, who in his opinion is greater. It could be coaches, it could be players, it could be past, it could be present. So we're going to start out with the present, Jack. Who is better, Tom Brady or Drew Brees?
Oh, Tom Brady. Tom Brady's better than Drew. Drew Brees is great. If Drew Brees was with the Patriots, they would have won the titles too, maybe. But Tom Brady would do some dramatic things. I mean, it's not so clear cut, but you can't sit here and say that Drew Brees was better. I don't think anyone could flat out say that. Okay.
I think the Saints depend on Drew Brees a lot more of his career than they did Tom Brady. That's just my opinion. But I do see it's very close.
But the Patriots won a lot more. So
I agree. Bart Starr or Johnny Unitas, Jack?
Oh, Johnny Unitas. They used to talk during their era. Bart Starr was with a well-oiled machine. He fit in beautifully with the Packers, but the master Johnny Unitas, I mean, he was, the master Johnny Unitas, absolutely.
Okay, listen, again, there's something to be said by winning Super Bowls, Jack. So I agree with you. Unitas was the better overall quarterback.
Unitas did win a couple. I mean,
yes, he did. Yeah. Yes, he did. But anyway, Jim Brown.
Unitas won 3 NFL championships, 2 before
right.
the
yes,
Super
he did.
Bowl.
Before there was
during the Super Bowl, so he had a share. Yeah.
Agree. Jim Brown or Barry Sanders, Jack?
Jim Brown didn't block, and he regretted that later. But Barry Sanders' own dad said his son was the second greatest running back in the history of the NFL. And his dad said Jim Brown was number 1.
Right.
Defer to Barry Sanders' father.
Right.
Let him make the selection for me.
And 2 different styles, both exciting and both great in your own right. Okay, Jack, Whitey Ford or Andy Pettit?
Whitey Ford. I mean, listen, if Whitey Ford were pitching today, he could be signed as an ace, a number 1 on any staff. On any staff, you could put him as a number 1. Andy Pettit was wonderful. We all love Andy Pettit. He was a hell of a pitcher. But let's be honest, Andy Pettit was clearly the number 3 starter when the Yankees had Clemens 1. Musina was clearly ahead of Andy Pettit, and Andy Pettit was number 3. The best number 3 starter in baseball. Right. He could be a wonderful number 2, but Andy Pettit wasn't a stat ace as wonderful as he was.
Okay. So we're going to go to closers, and I want you to take everything into consideration here, Jack, before you give me the obvious answer. Who's Gossage or Mariano Rivera?
Listen, Gossage would complain about this because he said Mariano would, pitch for shorter duration, 1 inning, 2 at most. He'd come in for a few. You have to look at the career. Gossage at his very best and Mariano at his very best were very equal.
Yes.
We're very equal because Gossage would dominate the same way Mariano did. And you could argue that he threw even harder. So he was a little more scary there. But you got to look at, Mariano's consistency, the career. If we're talking about give me each guy for 2 weeks and put him on my team as a closer, who cares? I mean, but over the career, absolutely Mariano.
Okay, now you're lining up. You're the Red Sox manager. And we talked about left fielders before, Jack. And it's you have one game to play, and your choice is Carl Yastrzemski or Ted Williams. Who are you putting in? Who's better?
Carl Yastrzemski. With that, because Carl Yastrzemski was not just a good left fielder, he was a terrific left fielder. I would love to, better question, let's discuss another time. If I could only have one guy as a DH for the Red Sox, and you should get a Red Sox fans to get involved, who would they want? Big Papi David Ortiz, the greatest DH in history, or they could have Ted Williams with the bat in his hand? That would be a debate for another time.
That would be a great question, Jack. So we're done here. We ran out of time. Great show today with Dr. Paul Semendinger, who did a great job for us as he always does every Saturday. Tomorrow we have our big football show, folks. Come on over and see us with our fantasy expert Anthony Servino and our controversial, opinionated guest from SportsScope, Robert Butler. It's a great show. We make our picks, we break down games, and we have a lot of fun. So, folks, until tomorrow.
Football Sunday tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Football Sunday, folks. So come on over, 8 to 10 tomorrow here on the Mac and Jack Sports Show. Great having you, and enjoy your Saturday, folks.